The final warning, Der. Sarah Chen stood in the crystal-clear communication chamber aboard the orbital station near Geneva, watching the stars shimmer beyond the transparent walls. As Earth's chief diplomatic officer, she had conducted hundreds of negotiations with alien species over the past 15 years, but today felt different. The emergency session called by the Galactic Assembly carried an ominous weight that made her stomach churn with unease. The holographic projection system hummed to life, filling the chamber with an ethereal blue glow. Slowly, the imposing figure of Prime Coordinator Velthak materialized before her. The reptilian alien stood nearly 9 feet tall, his scaled skin reflecting the chamber's light like polished emeralds. His 3 eyes, arranged in a triangle formation on his elongated skull, fixed upon Sarah with an intensity that had intimidated countless species across the galaxy. Behind Velthak, the shadowy forms of other assembly members became visible. Sarah recognized the floating, jellyfish-like Etherians, the insectoid Manthari with their clicking mandibles, and the stone-like Granithians whose ancient faces showed no emotion. These were the species that had ruled the galaxy for over 10,000 years, maintaining what they called cosmic order through strict regulation of technological advancement and social development. Dr. Chun, Velthak began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The translation matrix converted his native language into perfect English, but Sarah could hear the underlying tone of condescension that no technology could mask. The Galactic Assembly has reached a unanimous decision regarding humanity's continued membership in our civilization. Sarah felt her diplomatic training kick in, keeping her expression neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in her mind. Unanimous decisions from the Assembly were rare and usually devastating for the species involved. She had studied the historical records. The unanimous decision had resulted in the Kefarian civilization being stripped of their spacefaring capabilities and confined to their home system for 5 centuries. The Assembly is prepared to hear humanity's position. Sarah replied carefully, though she suspected this would be less of a negotiation and more of a sentencing. Velthak's central eye narrowed. A gesture Sarah had learned indicated either deep thought or barely contained irritation. Your species has become a source of significant concern for galactic stability. In the mere 3 centuries since first contact, humans have demonstrated an alarming propensity for rapid technological advancement, unpredictable social evolution, and dangerous independence of thought. The accusations stung because they were true. Humanity had indeed progressed faster than any species in recorded galactic history. While other civilizations took millennia to advance from basic space flight to interstellar travel, humans had accomplished it in less than 200 years. Their adaptability and creativity had solved problems that had stumped alien scientists for generations, and their willingness to question established norms had made them unpopular with the Assembly's rigid. The Assembly has observed, with growing alarm, your species' refusal to conform to established galactic protocols, continued Velthak. Your colonies operate with unacceptable autonomy. Your scientists pursue research without proper oversight. Your military forces employ tactics that violate traditional combat doctrines. Most troubling of all, your diplomats continue to advocate for policy changes that would destabilize our time-tested systems of governance. Sarah knew this was coming. Humanity's success had bred resentment among the established powers. Human colonies were thriving while many assembly worlds stagnated. Human innovations were revolutionizing industries that had remained unchanged for millennia. Human ideals of freedom and self-determination were inspiring other species to question their own circumstances. Therefore, Velthak announced, his voice taking on the formal cadence of an official proclamation, the Galactic Assembly hereby issues the following non-negotiable terms for humanity's continued existence within civilized space. The holographic display shifted, showing a detailed document with terms written in the flowing script of galactic standard. Sarah's neural implant immediately began translating and analyzing the text. and what she read made her blood run cold. First, Beltha continued, all human colonies beyond the Sol system must be surrendered to Assembly administration within one standard galactic year. Existing human populations will be relocated to designated sectors under direct Assembly oversight. Sarah's hands clenched into fists at her sides. Humanity had established 37 thriving colonies across 17 star systems. These weren't just settlements. They were homes to over 2 billion people who had spent generations building new lives among the stars. Second, all humans above the age of maturity must undergo mandatory behavioral modification procedures to eliminate antisocial tendencies such as excessive individualism, questioning of authority, and unpredictable creative thinking. These modifications will be administered by assembly medical specialists using proven techniques that have successfully pacified dozens of species. The word pacified sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She had seen the results of assembly behavioral modification on other species. The proud, warrior-like Thakari had been reduced to docile farmers. The brilliant Zephyrian engineers now served as mindless manual laborers. The artistic Melodians no longer created music, spending their days in silent contemplation of assembly teachings. Third, Earth and any remaining human settlements will accept permanent junior status within the assembly hierarchy. All major decisions affecting human populations will require assembly approval. Humans will be prohibited from holding positions of authority over other species and will be subject to regular compliance inspections. Sarah felt a rage building inside her that had nothing to do with diplomacy and everything to do with basic human dignity. The assembly wasn't offering terms. They were demanding the complete subjugation of her species. Fourth, human technological development will be restricted to assembly-approved parameters. All research and development activities must be conducted under direct alien supervision. Any innovations deemed potentially disruptive to galactic stability will be suppressed immediately. This, a final demand, revealed the Assembly's true fear. They weren't concerned about human aggression or expansion. They were terrified of human creativity. For 10,000 years, they had maintained power by controlling the pace of change, ensuring that no species could advance quickly enough to challenge their authority. Humanity represented everything they despised: unpredictability, rapid adaptation, and the dangerous idea that progress didn't require permission. These terms are effective immediately, Veltha concluded. Humanity has 72 standard hours to signal complete acceptance. Any delay or attempt at negotiation will be interpreted as rejection, and the Assembly will respond with appropriate force to maintain galactic order. Sarah stood in silence for a long moment, processing the magnitude of what she had just heard. The Assembly was demanding nothing less than the complete destruction of everything that made humanity unique. They wanted to turn her species into another collection of obedient servants, stripped of the curiosity and independence that had carried them from their home planet to the stars. "May I consult with Earth before providing a response?" Sarah asked, though protocol required her to stall for time while humanity's leaders processed this ultimatum. "You may," Belthic replied, his tone suggesting he already knew what humanity's answer would be. "But understand that these terms are final. The Assembly has shown remarkable patience with your species' disruptive behavior. This is your final opportunity to accept your proper place in galactic civilization." The holographic figures began to fade, but Velthic's 3 eyes remained fixed on Sarah until the very last moment. When the chamber fell silent again, Sarah activated her emergency communication link to Earth.President Maria Santos appeared on Sarah's personal display, her weathered face showing the strain of leading humanity through increasingly difficult times. Behind her, Sarah could see the flags of Earth's United Nations and the emergency session indicators that meant the Global Council was already in session. "Sarah, we monitored the entire transmission," President Santos said without preamble. "How long do we have?" 72 hours to surrender everything we've built, everything we are, and everything we hope to become," Sarah replied, her diplomatic composure finally cracking. They want to lobotomize our entire species and turn us into mindless servants. President Santos nodded grimly. The Global Council is unanimous for the first time in 50 years. We've reviewed the Assembly's terms, and our answer is simple. She paused, and Sarah could see the weight of history settling on her shoulders. Humanity refuses. Sarah felt a surge of pride mixed with terror. She had hoped for courage from her leaders, but she also understood the implications of defying the most powerful force in the galaxy. Madam President, you understand what this means? The Assembly has never failed to enforce their ultimatums. Their military forces outnumber us, thousands to one. We understand perfectly, Santos replied. But we also understand that some things are worth fighting for, even against impossible odds. We didn't fight our way from caves to starships just to surrender our freedom to a collection of aliens who are afraid of change. Sarah nodded, feeling the same fierce determination that had driven her species to overcome every obstacle in their path. What are my instructions? Send them our answer, President Santos said. Make it clear that humanity chooses freedom over security, chaos over stagnation, and hope over fear. If they want to suppress human spirit, they'll have to destroy us. First, because we will never willingly surrender what makes us human. Sarah composed herself and reactivated the communication system. Prime Coordinator Velthek's image appeared, his three eyes showing what might have been surprise at the quick response. The human government has reviewed your terms, Sarah began, her voice steady and clear. I am authorized to provide our official response. Excellent, Velthek replied, clearly expecting humanity's capitulation. The Assembly is prepared to begin implementation immediately. I'm afraid you misunderstood, Sarah said, and for the first time in her diplomatic career, she abandoned all pretense of polite negotiation. Humanity's answer is no. We reject your terms completely and formally withdraw from all Assembly treaties and agreements. The silence that followed was absolute. In 10,000 years of galactic history, no species had ever refused an Assembly ultimatum. Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. Furthermore, we hereby declare that any Assembly vessel approaching human space will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. We suggest the Assembly reconsider their position before taking actions they might regret. Velthek's scale seemed to darken with rage. You cannot be serious? Your species will be extinct within a standard year? Maybe, Sarah replied. But we'll die as free humans rather than live as Assembly slaves. And I suspect we won't be alone in that choice much longer. She cut the transmission, leaving Velthek's shocked expression frozen in the holographic static. Sarah Chen, diplomat and peacemaker, had just declared war on the most powerful force in the galaxy. But as she looked out at the stars that humanity had claimed as their birthright, she felt no regret. Some principles were worth any price. The die was cast. Humanity had chosen its path, and the galaxy would never be the same dot when diplomacy dies. Admiral Marcus Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UHS Defiance, watching the tactical display show the approaching Assembly Armada. 2 weeks had passed since Dr. Chen's defiant rejection of the ultimatum, and the alien response was everything humanity had feared and expected. 3,000 ships from 12 different Assembly species were converging on Proxima Station, humanity's most important military outpost beyond Earth. Marcus had spent 30 years in the human space navy, rising through the ranks during the peaceful expansion period, when humanity believed they could find their place in the galaxy through cooperation and diplomacy. Those days were over. The graying admiral now faced the greatest military challenge in human history. With only 200 ships and the knowledge that retreat meant abandoning everything his species had built among the stars. Sir, we're receiving another surrender. Demand from the Assembly fleet, reported Commander Lisa Park from the communications station. The young officer's voice remained steady, despite the overwhelming odds they faced. Same terms as before? Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Identical, sir. Immediate surrender of all human forces, dismantling of our defensive installations, and preparation for assembly occupation forces, Marcus allowed himself a bitter smile. The assembly still believed they were dealing with a conventional species that would follow established patterns of behavior. They expected humans to either surrender immediately when faced with superior numbers or make a desperate, suicidal frontal assault that would justify their overwhelming response. They had no understanding of human tactical thinking because no species had ever forced them to learn. Open a channel to all ships, Marcus ordered. Throughout the fleet, captains and crew members prepared for what might be their final battle. These weren't just military personnel. They were volunteers from every human colony. Scientists who had abandoned their research, engineers who had left their construction projects, and ordinary citizens who had chosen to fight rather than submit. This is Admiral Rodriguez, Marcus began, his voice carrying across the communication networks to every human ship in the system. In a few hours, we're going to face an enemy that has never been defeated in 10,000 years of galactic history. They expect us to follow their rules, fight their kind of war, and die according to their schedule. He paused, looking around the bridge at the faces of his crew. These people had families on the colonies, children who would grow up free or enslaved depending on what happened in the next few hours. But we're not going to give them what they expect. We're going to fight like humans, unpredictably, creatively, and with absolute determination to protect everything we hold dear. The assembly thinks they know how this battle will end. Let's prove them wrong. Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the approaching fleet from a research station hidden in the asteroid belt surrounding Proxima. As humanity's leading expert on alien technology, she had spent the past 2 weeks analyzing captured assembly equipment and making disturbing discoveries about the true nature of galactic civilization. Her findings had changed everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. The assembly's behavioral modification technology wasn't just a tool for maintaining order. It was evidence of a systematic campaign to prevent any species from reaching their full potential. Every member race had been deliberately stunted. Their natural evolution halted at a level that posed no threat to assembly dominance. Elena, are you getting this data? The voice belonged to Dr. James Wright, her research partner, who was analyzing similar equipment on Earth. The genetic markers we're finding suggest that every assembly species was once significantly more advanced than they are now. Elena studied the neural interface patterns she had from captured assembly technology. It's worse than we thought. James, these modifications don't just suppress creativity and independence. They're designed to make the changes inheritable. They've been systematically dumbing down entire civilizations for thousands of years. The implications were staggering. The assembly hadn't just conquered other species, they had stolen their futures, turning proud civilizations into docile servants who couldn't even remember what they had lost. And now they wanted to do the same thing to humanity. There's something else, Elena continued, her voice filled with excitement and horror. I found evidence of a resistance movement. Several species have been secretly working to preserve their original genetic patterns and cultural memories. They've been waiting for someone with the technological capability to reverse the modifications. Someone like us, James replied, understanding immediately. Exactly. We're not just fighting for human freedom. We're fighting for every species that has been enslaved by the Assembly's vision of order. The battle began exactly as Admiral Rodriguez had predicted. The Assembly fleet approached in their traditional formation, with heavy battleships in the center and support vessels arranged in precise geometric patterns around them. It was an impressive display designed to intimidate enemies into submission, but it also made the fleet slow and predictable. Commander Lisa Park coordinated the first phase of the human response from her position in the Fleet Command Center. Instead of meeting the assembly formation head-on, human ships scattered throughout the system like seeds on the wind. The alien commanders watched in confusion as their enemies seemed to flee in random directions. What are they doing? Asked Subcommander Thyrek aboard the assembly flagship. The reptilian officer had participated in dozens of punitive expeditions and had never seen such chaotic behavior from an enemy fleet. They appeared to be retreating, replied Fleet Commander Zephin, though uncertainty colored his voice. Perhaps they have realized the futility of resistance. But the humans weren't retreating. They were positioning themselves for a type of warfare the Assembly had never encountered. Captain Sarah Martinez led the first strike, bringing her squadron out of the asteroid field at maximum velocity. Her ships hit the Assembly rear guard like angry hornets, striking at engine clusters and communication arrays. Before vanishing back into the cosmic debris field, the aliens tried to respond with their massive weapons, but the asteroids provided perfect cover for ships designed for speed and maneuverability rather than heavy combat. Human pilots used the gravitational effects of the asteroids to slingshot their vessels into impossible attack angles, appearing where they couldn't possibly be in striking targets the aliens thought were protected. Captain David Chen commanded a wing of modified cargo ships that had been converted into mobile weapons platforms. These vessels looked harmless to Assembly sensors, but they carried experimental technology that Dr. Vasquez's team had developed. From studying alien equipment, when changed ships emerged from hiding and it began jamming Assembly communication networks, the alien fleet suddenly found itself unable to coordinate their responses. "Sir, we're losing contact with 17 squadrons," reported the communications officer aboard the Assembly flagship. "The humans are using some kind of interference counter." Fleet Commander Zephin felt the first stirrings of genuine concern. His fleet had overwhelming numerical and technological superiority, but the humans were fighting according to rules that made no sense. They struck from unexpected directions, used unconventional weapons, and seemed to coordinate their attacks without following any recognizable command structure. Admiral Rodriguez watched the battle unfold from his command ship, which remained hidden behind Proxima Station's defensive shields. Human losses were mounting, but they were taking out Assembly vessels at a rate that shocked both sides. More importantly, they were proving that the supposedly invincible Assembly could be hurt. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority message from Earth," Commander Park reported. "It's Dr. Chen." Sarah Chen's image appeared on the main screen, but she was no longer speaking from the diplomatic station. Behind her, Rodriguez could see the busy activity of what looked like a military command. "Center. Marcus, I have news that changes everything," Sarah said without preamble. "Dr. Vasquez's research has revealed that we're not alone. There are resistance movements throughout Assembly space, species that have been secretly preserving there true heritage while waiting for someone capable of helping them break free." Rodriguez felt his tactical thinking shift as new possibilities opened up. "How many species are we talking about?" "At least 12 that we've confirmed, probably more. The Kisara have been particularly helpful. They've been documenting Assembly atrocities for centuries and building hidden communication networks. They're ready to act as soon as they see proof that the Assembly can be defeated." The implications hit Rodriguez immediately. This wasn't just a battle for human survival. It was the opening move in a galaxy-wide revolution. Every Assembly ship he destroyed, every tactical victory his fleet achieved, would inspire oppressed species across the galaxy to believe that freedom was possible. "Sarah, tell the Kithara and anyone else who's listening that they're about to see something the galaxy hasn't witnessed in 10,000 years, Rodriguez said. "They're going to see the Assembly lose." The tide of battle turned when Captain Elena Santos led her engineering squadron in a desperate attack on the Assembly command ship. Her vessels were outnumbered 50-1, but they carried the most advanced electronic warfare systems humanity had ever developed. As they closed with the enemy flagship, Santos activated every jamming device, every sensor disruptor, and every communication scrambler her ships possessed. The result was chaos throughout the Assembly fleet. Ship captains found themselves unable to contact their commanders. Targeting systems failed to lock onto human vessels, and coordination between different alien species broke down completely. For the first time in millennia, an Assembly fleet was fighting blind. Human squadrons pressed their advantage, using their superior maneuverability to strike at critical targets throughout the confused alien formation. The massive assembly battleships, designed to win through raw firepower, found themselves helpless against enemies they couldn't track or predict. When the battle ended 6 hours later, the supposedly invincible assembly armada was in full retreat. They had lost over 800 ships, including 3 of their most advanced dreadnoughts, while human casualties numbered fewer than 60 vessels. More importantly, the entire engagement had been broadcast across the galaxy through the hidden networks that resistant species have been building for centuries. Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the alien communication channels as panic spread through assembly space. Emergency sessions were being called on dozens of worlds, and several species were openly questioning assembly authority for the first time in their recorded history. "Marcus, you need to see this," Elena transmitted from her monitoring station. "The Zephyrian military caste is refusing orders to suppress demonstrations on their homeworld. The Melodian artists are performing forbidden songs. Even some of the assembly member species are beginning to ask uncomfortable questions about their own modifications." Admiral Rodriguez smiled as he surveyed the aftermath of humanity's first major victory against galactic tyranny. They had proven that the assembly could be defeated, but more importantly, they had lit a spark that was already spreading across the galaxy. Other species were beginning to remember what they had lost and to believe that they could reclaim it. "Commander Park, send a message to all human colonies," Rodriguez ordered. "Tell them that the first battle is won, but the war is just beginning. And send a message to our new friends throughout the galaxy. Tell them that humanity stands ready to help anyone who chooses freedom over slavery." The revolution had begun, and there would be no turning back. The galaxy awakened. Captain James Park stood on the observation deck of the UHS Liberation, watching as another assembly world burned in the distance. But these weren't the fires of conquest or destruction. They were the flames of rebellion as an oppressed species finally broke free from 10,000 years of enforced servitude. In the 6 months since Admiral Rodriguez's victory at Proxima Station, the galaxy had erupted into revolution on a scale never before seen in recorded history. James commanded one of 12 liberation fleets that humanity had dispatched across assembly space. Their mission wasn't conquest, but something far more dangerous to the established order. They were spreading hope. Each world they visited received the same offer: freedom from assembly control, access to human medical technology that could reverse genetic modifications, and the chance to rediscover their species' true heritage. "Captain, we're receiving transmissions from the Kithara underground on Velos Prime," reported Lieutenant Maria Santos from the communication station. The young officer was the daughter of Earth's president, but she had chosen to serve in the liberation fleets rather than accept a position in the home defense forces. "What's their status?" James asked as he moved to the tactical display showing the orbital positions around the contested world below. "The resistance is ready to move. They've been documenting assembly genetic modification facilities for over 2 centuries, and they have detailed plans of every installation on the planet. They're waiting for our signal to begin the uprising." James studied the tactical situation carefully. Velos Prime was defended by a moderate assembly force, but more importantly, it served as a regional medical center where thousands of beings from dozens of species received their mandatory behavioral modification treatments. If they could capture and expose the facilities intact, it would provide irrefutable evidence of assembly crimes against sentient life. "Signal to Kithara that we're beginning our approach," James ordered. "And patch me through to Dr. Vasquez on Earth. She want to monitor what we find down there." Dr. Elena Vasquez appeared on the communication screen, but the background behind her showed she was no longer in her original research facility. Over the past months, as liberated species shared their preserved knowledge and technology, Elena had been working with a growing team of scientists from across the galaxy to understand the full scope of assembly manipulation. "James, we're tracking your mission with great interest," Elena said. The data we've collected from other liberated worlds has revealed patterns we never imagined. The Assembly's genetic modification program isn't just about control, it's about preventing evolution itself. What do you mean? James asked as his ship entered the outer atmosphere of Hellos Prime. Below them, the lights of rebellion were already beginning to flicker as P-Thera resistance cells moved into position. Every species in the galaxy was once significantly more advanced than they are now, Elena explained. The Assembly didn't just conquer them, they rolled back their development by thousands of years and then locked them at that level. We're not just fighting oppression, James. We're fighting deliberate devolution on a galactic scale. The implications hit James like a physical blow. If Elena was right, then every species in the galaxy had been robbed of millennia of natural progress. The Assembly hadn't just created an empire. They had created a vast prison where entire civilizations were prevented from reaching their true potential. How many species could be restored to their original capabilities? James asked. All of them, Elena replied. Every single one. The genetic patterns are still there, suppressed but not destroyed. With the right techniques, we could help dozens of species rediscover abilities they've forgotten they ever had. The landing operation on Velos Prime proceeded with a precision that would have been impossible without Kythara assistance. The underground resistance movement had spent generations mapping every assembly, installation, and identifying every collaborator. When human forces touched down at strategic locations around the planet, they found local fighters ready to guide them to their targets. Commander Sarah Wright led the assault on the primary genetic modification center, a massive complex that processed over 10,000 beings per year. The facility's assembly guards were caught completely off guard by the coordinated attack from human forces and Kythara rebels working together. The resistance fighters know this place better than the guards do, Wright reported as her team moved through the facility's corridors. They've been documenting everything for decades. They know which procedures are performed in which rooms, which scientists are willing collaborators, and which ones are just following orders. What they found inside the facility shocked even veterans who had seen the aftermath of assembly oppression on other worlds. The modification procedures were conducted on an industrial scale, with beings from across the galaxy processed like manufactured goods. The medical records revealed the systematic suppression of traits that the Assembly considered dangerous: creativity, curiosity, independence, and the ability to question authority. But most disturbing were the archives that documented the Assembly's long-term goals. They weren't just maintaining control over existing species, they were actively working to prevent the emergence of new, intelligent life in the galaxy. Any world that showed signs of developing sentience was quietly sterilized before its inhabitants could achieve spaceflight. Dr. Vasquez analyzed the captured data from her coordination center on Earth, her face growing paler with each new revelation. James, what we're seeing here goes beyond anything we imagined. The Assembly has been systematically stunting galactic evolution for 50,000 years. They've prevented hundreds of species from ever reaching their full potential. Across the galaxy, similar discoveries were being made on world after world as human. Liberation fleets worked with local resistance movements to expose assembly facilities. The evidence was overwhelming and impossible to deny. The supposed guardians of galactic civilization were actually its greatest enemy, parasites feeding on the potential of countless species. The most dramatic revelation came when Captain Lisa Chen's fleet liberated the Zephyrian military training worlds. The Zephyrians had been the Assembly's primary enforcers for 20,000 years, genetically modified into perfect soldiers who felt no doubt and showed no mercy. But when Dr. Vasquez's reversal techniques were applied to volunteer Zephyrian warriors, the results exceeded everyone's expectations. Commander Thylex was the first Zephyrian to undergo complete genetic restoration. When he awoke from the procedure, his eyes showed an intelligence and creativity that his species hadn't possessed for millennia. Within hours, he was designing new tactical systems that revolutionized human military doctrine. Within days, he had convinced his entire unit to join the rebellion against their former masters. We were engineers, Thylix explained during a video conference with Earth's leadership. Before the assembly modified us, my people were the greatest builders in the galaxy. We constructed star-spanning megastructures and designed technologies that could reshape entire solar systems. The assembly turned us into soldiers because they feared what we might create if left free. Similar stories emerged from every liberated world. The artistic Melodians had once been galactic-class mathematicians whose musical compositions contained hidden formulas for advanced physics. The docile Ktamari farmers had been master geneticists who could design life forms adapted to any environment. The meditative Quender had been quantum engineers who understood the fundamental nature of reality itself. As more species recovered their true heritage, they brought knowledge and capabilities that accelerated the liberation effort exponentially. Human innovation combined with restored alien expertise created technologies that the assembly couldn't counter. The rebellion spread faster than their forces could respond, and world after world declared independence from assembly rule. President Maria Santos addressed the galaxy from Earth's capital, her words broadcast through the growing network of free worlds. Behind her stood representatives from over 30 liberated species, each one a testament to what beings could accomplish when freed from assembly control. People of the galaxy, President Santos began, for 50,000 years, you have been told that the assembly represents order, stability, and wisdom. Today, we reveal the truth. They represent stagnation, oppression, and fear of what you might become if given the chance to grow. The broadcast showed footage from liberated worlds, where freed species were rediscovering abilities they had forgotten for millennia. Zephyrian engineers were constructing space habitats in impossible configurations. Melodian scientists were composing mathematical symphonies that solved previously unsolvable problems. Flowering geneticists were developing crops that could grow in the vacuum of space. The assembly claims that rapid change brings chaos, Santos continued. But we have seen what their version of order produces: stagnation, despair, and the slow death of everything that makes life worth living. We offer a different path, one where every species can reach its full potential without fear of suppression. The final phase of the revolution began when the liberated species combined their restored knowledge to create something the galaxy had never seen before: a truly cooperative civilization where diversity was strength rather than threat. The Free Worlds alliance that emerged from the rebellion wasn't dominated by any single species, but represented the combined wisdom of dozens of civilizations working together. Dr. Sarah Chen, who had started the conflict with her defiant rejection of assembly demands, now served as the alliance's first secretary general. Her role wasn't to rule, but to coordinate the efforts of species that were finally free to become everything they were meant to be. The assembly taught us that different species couldn't work together without strict hierarchy and control, Sarah explained during the alliance's founding ceremony. But we've proven that the opposite is true. When species are free to be themselves, they naturally complement each other's strengths and compensate for each other's weaknesses. The assembly's final desperate gambit came when they attempted to use the remaining forces to destroy Earth itself, hoping that eliminating humanity would stop the rebellion from spreading further. But they discovered that the revolution had grown beyond any single species' control. When assembly fleets approached the Sol system, they found it defended not just by human ships, but by vessels from every liberated world in the galaxy. The battle for Earth lasted only 6 hours. The assembly's rigid military doctrine, which had served them for millennia, crumbled against the combined creativity of dozens of free species working together. Zephyrian tactical genius, Melodian mathematical precision, Kari biological warfare, and human adaptability proved unstoppable when combined. When the smoke cleared, the assembly's military power was broken forever. Their remaining leadership attempted to negotiate a conditional surrender, but they discovered that the galaxy was no longer interested in compromise with oppressors. Captain James Park stood once again on the observation deck of his ship, but now he looked out at a galaxy transformed. The rigid order that had stifled Progress for 50,000 years was gone, replaced by a chaotic but vibrant civilization where new discoveries were made daily and impossible things became routine. Status report from the exploration fleets. James asked Lieutenant Santos, who had been promoted to his executive officer. Incredible news, sir, Maria replied with barely contained excitement. The Melodian Zephyrian Research Consortium has developed faster than light communication that works across galactic distances. The Clari have successfully created the first artificial biosphere that generates its own gravity. And the human-Quender collaboration has made a breakthrough in dimensional physics that could revolutionize space travel. James smiled as he contemplated what the next decade might bring. For the first time in galactic history, dozens of advanced species were free to pursue knowledge and achievement without limitation. The possibilities were literally infinite. And the former assembly worlds? James asked. Most have requested assistance with genetic restoration for their populations. The process is voluntary, but the response has been overwhelming. Beings who have lived their entire lives in mental fog are desperate for the chance to think clearly. Again, Dr. Elena Vasquez's final report to the Alliance Council painted a picture of a galaxy on the verge of a golden age, unlike anything in recorded history. Species were not only recovering their lost abilities, but surpassing their previous achievements through cooperation with other free civilizations. The Assembly's greatest fear was that unrestricted development would lead to chaos and destruction, Elena concluded. Instead, we've discovered that freedom and diversity are the greatest drivers of progress and prosperity. The galaxy they tried to preserve through control was already dying from stagnation. The galaxy we're building together is alive with infinite potential. Sarah Chen stood before the memorial wall on Earth that honored those who had died in the Liberation War. The price of freedom had been high, but as she looked out at a galaxy where beings from hundreds of worlds worked together to explore the universe's mysteries, she knew it had been worth paying. Humanity had refused to negotiate their independence away, and in doing so, they had sparked a revolution that freed not just themselves, but every thinking being in the galaxy. The age of assembly control was over. The age of unlimited possibility had begun. And in the vast reaches of space, new civilizations were emerging from worlds that had been sterilized millennia ago, their development no longer constrained by ancient fears. The galaxy was growing again, reaching toward a future that no one could predict, but everyone was free to help create. The revolution was complete, but the real adventure was just beginning.